Chapter 15, When I Consider How My Light is Spent. When I consider how my light is spent. The hospital smelled of blood and alcohol. It reminded Clown Muffle of places in her past, but not all of those memories were bad. She no longer had to think about that time. So she didn't. At one point she closed her eyes, and when she opened them it became morning, or a vague psychic morning because it remained dark. She rose from her bed, and from the row of identical hospital beds beside her rose several other girls in her platoon. Everyone had made a lot of noise the night before due to the situation with Seattle. The specifics remained intentionally murky in Clown Muffle's mind, but the end result was that everyone, not only her, spent a night in the hospital. Some of them, maybe, alternated guard duty.
Everyone up, said
Lila? Yes, Lila, in the doorway beside a section of wall encompassed by that omnipresent portrait of the Empress.
Assemble in front of administration for your next orders. Junior Administrator,
said one of Clown Muffle's fellow former sleepers,
what about our morning ablutions? We are in crisis mode, ladies, no time for that. Chop chop.
Crisis mode churned Clown Muffle's stomach, or maybe that was hunger. Sick people became weaker easier in Clown Muffle. She had to admit it. She was sick. Meanwhile, the same girl expressed unexpected persistence.
With all due respect, Junior Administrator, the Empress's code is clear. Soldiers of the Empire are not to forego any regimen of cleanliness no matter they.
Fine.
But make it fast. Go.
They filed through a dingy corridor cluttered by stained cardboard boxes full of bottles and speculums and arms to a door labeled washroom by a sign in industrial lettering. The problem, clear to Clown Muffle before the others, was that the washroom did not have separate stalls for each shower. Instead, the washroom contained only a broad tiled surface with a few drains interspersed in a geometric pattern and 10 to 12 nozzles jutting from the walls. The tile was once white but now ruddy brown or reddish. More like a room for delousing than a shower.
Ah,
she said to the girls lined behind her,
this won't work.
The other girls ignored her and entered the room. Their bare feet slapped against the tile as they started to pull their white nightgowns over their heads before they even reached the racks at the far end of the room, where they dropped the plain articles unceremoniously. Clown Muffle reeled back and struck the wall of the corridor as the more nude of the bunch swiveled dials and turned on the water. A lanky androgyne of colorless skin tilted back her head and let her stringy brown hair dangle. She said,
"We got no towels. One of you ask the physician for some and quick."
If Clown Muffle had presence of mind, she would have ran for the physician, but her paralysis welded her to the wall and someone at the back of the line saluted and dashed away faster. Clown Muffle might still have run away from this wall of sudden nudity if the few girls who hadn't yet disrobed didn't grab her by the arms and shove her into the shower room.
"Come on, Flossmoor, we gotta be quick,"
said a girl whose face could not be seen because she was pulling her shirt up over it. Gah! Why? This was so improper. Clown Muffle retreated to the corner and slipped halfway there so that she had to throw her hands between the intersecting walls to catch herself. Someone giggled, followed by a harsh look and a sharp word from a girl with red hair and 50 matching freckles. The girl was another one of the tall ones, in this steaming cube, only heights and colors distinguished person from person. Thankfully, the redhead still wore her gown as she approached Clown Muffle, one hand outstretched.
"Since you showed up late yesterday, nobody even got a chance to introduce themselves. It's understandable you're nervous."
She smiled and extended a hand.
I'm Orland. Don't baby her,
said a rough-throated voice from the flesh mob.
She's young, she had a traumatic experience last night, and she's our sister. Let the officers bark at her.
Orland's hand remained outstretched. Young. They thought Clown Muffle, who beat all of them in age, was young. That mistake eased the palpitations more than Orland's unthreatening demeanor. After all, Clown Muffle's mentor, she had red hair too. But obviously Orland was a different person. Clown Muffle took her hand and shook.
Now don't worry. I know you might not be used to it, but nobody will make fun of you or anything.
She fired another glare at the same person who giggled before.
The whole "we're all girls here" thing is kind of trite, yeah? So I'll say instead we're more like sisters here. Yeah.
Clown Muffle never had a sister. She had no need to remember that. Her mind frothed with things she'd rather not remember and for a long time had not needed to remember. Another image, more closely connected to the concept sister, entered her mind to replace it, the Seattle twins. All right, she could do this. If she could do the thing she did that one time, no. This was more like what she had done with the physician, when the physician poked and prodded her. In fact, it should be even less strenuous than that, because nobody would touch her. Yet somehow the paralysis ossified her even worse than in the doctor's office with the Empress's portrait staring her down. Play their games, win their prizes. She fully planned to acquire the information necessary to repair her soul gem today. So she only needed to wear the proper mask a little longer, for everything she had gone through until now it was nothing to ga. She did it. Fast and without thinking she removed her nightgown and threw it onto the rack. She kept her face pointed down, at nothing, and slinked along the wall away from Orland and all others to one of the unoccupied shower nozzles. About 20 naked girls buzzed in the room, but the room was large. She had her space. Orland did not press her any further or even say anything. Wet footsteps clapped away and the next time she heard Orland's voice it was on the other side of the room, in a casual conversation. Clown Muffle thanked her silently. Now she could pretend nobody in this room existed as the warm water poured over her goosebump skin. People should always wear clothes when among others. That woven barrier, without it, too much of one's self became known. Everything under her skin burned and she folded inward, arms crossed in front of her chest. Her body stooped slightly as her knees needed. She wanted to wash quickly but at the same time she refused to move her arms. The moment's nerve that allowed her to remove her nightgown disappeared as the water slapped against her bare skin and the voices of the others reverberated in the clear acoustics.
That's because, didn't hear, Plainfield thought, but, ha, you goof. She looked great in yesterday's exercises, but she's kinda, no, seriously, I think Orland knows. Hey Orland, shut up and quit talking.
Footsteps pattered across the hall and the girl who left earlier for towels skidded inside with an armful of them, only to immediately slip and slam onto her side. The towels went everywhere, some into the pool of water that swirled along the floor into the central drain.
Oh dear, you okay?
The girls helped her up while others picked up towels. At least now nobody was looking at Clown Muffle, and although it didn't help much, it helped enough for her to kinda rub her arms and shoulders and hair under the water. She had no soap or shampoo.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
The girl they helped up, she had a familiar voice. On scrutiny, she turned out to be the one who accompanied Clown Muffle on the wraith hunt the night prior. Her name was
Midlothian,
said Orland.
It's cool you're enthusiastic, but Puella Magi need to exhibit grace and poise and all that. Apologies for my shoddy, grace.
Midlothian straightened and saluted.
Put the towels over there and shower as quick as you can. Yes.
The distraction ended and Clown Muffle felt no cleaner than before, although at least her hair was wet. She ought to take the hygiene loss and go for a towel, but a magical girl needed to always look her best, and while a lot of that did fall upon her outfit, elements of personal grooming remained likewise essential. Dr. Cho had left a medicinal scent upon her. Cleanliness, grace, poise. An always hopeful demeanor. These were the things that a magical girl required. Clown Muffle had to have faith that she still had all of them.
Here you go.
A small hand held out a bar of soap. Clown Muffle regarded this foreign object in utter incomprehension until her eyes slowly tilted along the length of the arm until the holder's face appeared in her periphery. Her height alone, being possibly the only girl in the room shorter than Clown Muffle, distinguished her, Midlothian.
Kinda weird to wash without it, right?
The soap dropped into Clown Muffle's hand, but Clown Muffle was frozen. Midlothian's voice pounded against her.
I wanted to thank you for helping me out last night. Please go away. Hun? What did you say?
No doubt, Midlothian's eyes looked at her body, all of it, and no capacity for her skeletal structure to collapse on itself would ever suffice. Even the idea of her bare back being seen, let alone the other parts, made her tremble.
Oh. You're nervous. I get that.
Midlothian fell to a whisper.
I felt weird too my first day. But hey, I think you're real cool, okay? I want you to know that. Cool. Yeah. Last night was, well, it was so scary. For so many reasons. I'm still trying to process the whole thing. I still don't know what happened to Lieutenant Bolingbroke, and everyone in charge hasn't said much other than we're under attack, and when it all happened I was so freaked out I couldn't even think. But you.
Clown Muffle had been disgusting. Floundering around with a broken leg and a rotted body, she had essentially died if not for good luck. Luck, of course, was the final stat of the magical girl. When strength, stamina, speed, and defense all failed, a magical girl was still inherently luckier than a human. But to rely on that aspect only deepened her shame, and she coiled forward with her arms pressed against herself.
You were so cool. Even if you did some weird stuff to my costume and got me in trouble. But all the other stuff, and you taught me a way I could use my power better. When I came here to Chicago and saw all the awesome powers everyone else had, I thought mine was super lame. But now I know something I can do nobody else can.
Midlothian's arms and hands lathered herself with soap. She had some feature Clown Muffle had failed to notice before, a line of scarred tissue that ran from her collarbone straight down the center of SSST. Clown Muffle refused to look. Impropriety, and the girl operated so casually.
Anyway, I can tell you don't like it here, but I really wanna ask you to stick around. This is a good place, and... Are you slackers done yet?
Lila's head poked through the doorway. Something especially horrible about letting Lila of all people see Clown Muffle in such a state petrified any slight range of movement she had, but Lila's eyes were fixed toward the center of the room, where Orland and a few of the more obviously older girls stood.
No way would you be taking this long if Lieutenant Bolingbroke gave the order. Turn the water off and move. You heard her,
said Orland.
Water off, dry off, and suit up. Move it.
The faucets squeaked and the water blossomed into nothing. Midlothian frantically scrabbled at her skin to get the soap off, but Clown Muffle had never applied the soap in the first place, so she instead stood in twisted disappointment at her filthiness. Someone flung towels at them and Clown Muffle hastily cocooned herself in one. Everything became at ease.
But yeah, as I was saying,
Midlothian drying her hair with her towel,
this place, it's a lot better than it looks at first. I know I've only been here a few days myself, but back in Grand Rapids, where I'm from. Why are you telling me this? Any of it?
Midlothian's head tilted.
Hun? Because I want to be your friend, of course.
That. It made no sense. Midlothian was Clown Muffle's friend. All magical girls were. Even the ones she fought, even the handmaiden. The handmaiden was her rival, after all, and rivals became friends in the end. Murietta Temecula, Lila, even that grouchy Denver. And Bolingbroke, well, Bolingbroke in her lack of any distinguishing traits made it difficult to perceive her as a true magical girl. Sometimes you got exceptions like that. The girl in St. Louis too, who created wraiths. What had her name been? She was basically a wraith herself, so of course she didn't count. But anyway. Technicalities aside, Midlothian was definitely Clown Muffle's friend. Which made this conversation extremely ridiculous. Clown Muffle turned to follow the girls already finishing their showers, back to the sleeping room where their suits would be. The flow of conversation continued animated around her as Clown Muffle noticed most of the girls had short hairdos, quicker to wash and style. Often short to the point of buzz cuts. On one hand, she wanted to applaud the boldness of such a choice, but on the other, she figured most did it for convenience.
Hey, come on, I'm sorry if I upset you or anything,
said Midlothian.
Would it be okay if we're friends? Everyone here seems to already know each other anyway. Yes. Yes, it's fine. Oh. I guess you don't want to. Okay. That's okay. I said it's fine. Yeah.
They entered the room with the beds. Each had a fresh suit folded at the foot. Some beds also had additional feminine items. Who provided the suits, or the items, Clown Muffle only guessed. Dr. Cho's creations? Murietta Temecula, who had been missing the entire time? Lila? Somebody with information about measurements, because everything fit Clown Muffle perfectly. Nothing exceeded the feel of clean luxury clothes. Or the look of the Empress in her portrait. Clown Muffle, engorged with pride's resurgence, took especial care with every crease and button. But as she looked at the Empress's portrait, something about it seemed off, unlike what she had seen before.
Ah!
Midlothian.
Flossmoor, sorry to bother you again, but I don't know how to tie a necktie.
Clown Muffle loved tying neckties. She jerked Midlothian into position, flipped her around, and slid the tie around her collar, over, under, over again, up, and down through the knot. Then one sharp tug to tighten it, the tightness absolutely essential, and voila! Perfect.
HRK,
said Midlothian.
Thanks.
These white suits, if only they didn't wear these white suits. Their impeccable fashion delegitimized so many of Clown Muffle's quibbles. Most of the girls around her were somehow faster at dressing than her, and most who remained applied a bit of magic to their hair, if they had any, to instantly finish it. Others brushed teeth, flossed, all diligent, all to Clown Muffle's satisfaction.
All right,
she said to Midlothian, who had not yet charmed her hair from its frazzled, hand-dried state.
Since my mood's improved, I'll give you great advice. You will. You're a good friend, after all.
Clown Muffle paused to think up some advice to give her. She snapped her fingers.
Girls like you are super cute and can bring a lot of energy, especially if we work on the stuff we already talked about last night about personal identity. But at the same time, girls like you are the most likely to die. So you should try especially hard not to die. Try not to die. Yes. Lots of girls forget that. I'd say the 3 most important precepts for being a magical girl. PMMM,
interrupted a completely unrelated girl apparently in earshot.
Are 1, look good, 2, be a good person, and 3, don't die. We've already worked on the first precept, the second I get a feeling you're okay on that one, so that leaves the third. You need to act with confidence in your abilities. Lightning is powerful. Not only for the reasons I stated last night. It's also faster than almost any other attack. Nobody can avoid lightning, even me. I always thought my power was weak. No. If you harness your innate potential. Midlothian,
said the same unrelated girl, on a bent to make herself related.
You would be better off looking to a more veteran PMMM for guidance.
Clown Muffle might have mustered a response against this nobody, whose drab demeanor suited her drab appearance, but Lila reappeared in the doorway and scolded them one final time. But it was as though Lila, becoming a Lieutenant Bolingbroke copy, sponged the Bolingbroke out of everyone else. They managed a degree of discipline, but cracks appeared in their cohesion, cracks that gave them personality. 2 girls whispering a jab at Lila's cushy job, one spending an extra bit of time with a hand mirror to add a twisty curl to her bangs. Midlothian failed to do anything with her hair, so it coalesced into a ball of lint around her head. If Clown Muffle looked, she could find something unique about each of them. She bid adieu to the portrait of the Empress as she passed through the door. Once it left her sight, any of its remaining sway diminished. A freedom swelled in her mind, perhaps buoyed by her mood, and she immediately set her mind to her most important task. How to steal the Empire's records. Darkness coated the outside except a dull gray over the lake. The administration building, as bland as its name, was a 2-story structure with 3 or 4 rooms to a floor. Clown Muffle's experience inside it was an entryway, a hallway, and Lila's office. Lila had a large number of filing cabinets, but if she told the truth, and Clown Muffle trusted her, she had no access to the file Clown Muffle needed. So the file would probably be in a different office, on the 2nd floor maybe. Unless the building had a basement. Point of entry posed no problem, windows lined every wall. Opportunity might prove more pertinent. Seattle and the specialist shook the Chicago girls, but bad luck had concentrated them exactly at the spot Clown Muffle planned to raid. Bah, what was this? Plans? She had never needed them before. It made more sense to go with fate's flow. Feel the course that suited her and act upon it. But she scratched her head. Fate's flow fucked her of late. Or maybe she, in resisting it somewhere, had caused her own woes. Either way, the natural course was obviously to steal the file she needed. Providence provided her Seattle as the opportunity. The twins would attack again, correct? Why else would they have come? She bumped into someone as she exited the medical building. One of the white-haired, red-eyed creations of Dr. Cho, crouched on the pavement between the 2 buildings, examining a spot with a microscope and tweezing bitty rocks into a petri dish. The other 2 creations did the same elsewhere around the area, and Dr. Cho herself crawled on her knees, leaving bloody handprints everywhere as she inspected the spot nearest where God or whoever appeared the night prior.
Ignore the physician please,
said Lila. Several girls, not only Clown Muffle, looked up.
Get into formation. Your centurion, the illustrious and renowned Lady Joliet, intends to deliver your orders.
All thoughts of plans blipped out of Clown Muffle's mind at the mention of Joliet, that amazing girl of spectacular design, and she stood on tiptoe and even jumped to see over the shoulders of the much taller everyone around her. No sign of Joliet, and the expected formation forced Clown Muffle and the other recruits to stand in the back. The ebb and flow of the space shuffled Clown Muffle into the corner, shoulder to shoulder with Murietta Temecula.
HNNNK.
A melodious, jagged glass voice cleared its throat. It came from the front of the cluster. Clown Muffle leaned around the side of the formation to see, but received an elbow from the girl in front of her.
Yes, hello, it is I, or it is me, your centurion, Joliet.
A long longitude. Long pause. The scratch of Dr. Cho and her homunculi across the pavement accompanied an occasional rap-tap-tapping of someone's foot in the front. Eventually, Orland said,
Yes, milady. Oh NNK. I have important news. I'm sure, most of you, are wondering why you were ordered to spend the night here instead of your usual barracks.
Another long pause, again filled by Orland, whose red hair proved the sole thing Clown Muffle could see of the front.
Milady, Junior Administrator Hedgewish and I have already informed the platoon of the key details, namely that several invaders have assaulted the city. Why, yeah. It's very good, thank you, Hammond. Orland, milady. Oh, no. I knew it, please. Believe me, I knew it. I got, mixed up. Understood, milady. Maybe it would be best if you let me speak,
said Lila, as unseen as Joliet.
These sorry excuses for Puella Magi lack all decorum. Have you, Miss Orland, also informed your platoon that Lieutenant Bolingbroke is almost assuredly deceased?
From the shudder that pervaded the ranks, Clown Muffle assumed not. Even the staunch girl in front of her flinched, and Clown Muffle finally had a chance to lean around the side of the formation and glimpse her commander. Centurion Joliet, one hand folded downward at the wrist and the other hand perched atop it as she swayed and blew a thin collection of salt and pepper hair from her eyes. What exactly of her composition stirred Clown Muffle's heart so? In an instant she realized, because Joliet contained some semblance of that portrait, those divine features, that lordly body, and a deep similarity in the eyes, especially the eyes that always peered upon the observer no matter from which angle stood, all those elements awash in a new, more degenerate template. At one point in the previous night's encounter with God had diminished, become a teenage girl, but this wasn't like that. In fact, its differences pushed into light the superiority of Joliet. For the Empress, her portrait, no matter how lordly it seemed, and what power it held over her, compared to the God who manifested before her, the Empress became nothing, a pale and earthly imitation. The spell of the portrait no longer held any sway upon Clown Muffle, for she had encountered something of far further perfection. And yet, the deliberate earthly elements of Joliet, that mixture of divine and base, her inherent ugliness swirled within a frame that ought to have been beautiful, those elements all far exceeded the baseness that had appeared in the God, so that from a purely aesthetic point of view the shortcomings of the Empress's appearance were more than compensated by the advantages of Joliet's individual quirks. It all came together so clearly, her understanding total.
Flossmoor. Back into position, you unruly splotch.
The voice belonged to Lila, who cut in front of Joliet, arms folded behind her back and a fur jacket perched upon the shoulders of her white suit. The sheer vitriol forced Clown Muffle into her slot,
This is the level of uselessness you and your platoon exhibit. And befitting. No wonder you were all left behind while your sisters marched forth to conquest. Now consider the danger we are all in and act with more respect for the authorities who will guide you to safety. Centurion Joliet has appointed me temporary lieutenant, which means I am your direct superior and you will obey my commands. Centurion Joliet, milady,
said Orland.
Not to call into question your judgment, but shouldn't someone with more leadership experience receive this post? Junior Administrator Hedgewish. I believe she knows what she's doing.
Correct, said Lila. At certain times, between the rows of humans in front of her, Clown Muffle saw Lila flit. She appeared to pace.
I've had all night to plan our course of action. It's fortunate we haven't been attacked again, but that's likely because our opponents needed to recharge. However, I'm certain they'll attack before our reinforcements arrive. How can you be certain of such a thing?
Said Orland.
Think about it for 5 seconds. If they... I apologize,
said Orland,
but someone of your rank ought to have punished me for such an impertinent question.
Nobody spoke. No, half accurate, Joliet made choking noises in her throat. But otherwise a projected period of silence descended, so long that Clown Muffle had a fleeting opportunity to construct a mental image of Joliet's form that would be easy to recall at a moment.
If you intend for us to respect your command,
said Orland,
then rather than simply shout at us, you must demonstrate the willingness to apply the correct level of discipline.
The harsh but unmistakable sound of a knife being drawn and slashed across someone's face echoed between the buildings. The red-headed dome, barely visible above the other heads, lurched to the side. Orland straightened herself and said,
"Thank you, milady. As I was saying..."
Lila wiped something against her clothes and Clown Muffle cringed at the thought of a blood-stained pant leg. Although it did lend an aura of mystique to an ensemble. The specifics of the application were paramount, but she could not see Lila in such detail. Whatever blade Lila had drawn slid back into its sheath.
It's clear, given the coordination of our attackers and the extremely convenient timing of their attack, mixed with the threat the incubator gave earlier, that he has masterminded this assault. With that in mind, we have to assume the invaders have perfect intelligence of our movements, including the movements of Centurion Cicero's platoon, who will reinforce us at some point. Therefore, we also have to assume that our invaders will launch a full assault on us before then, with an aim toward our eradication before Centurion Cicero arrives.
Oh, said Joliet.
I think I get it. It makes sense. Our enemy here is not simply 3 powerful Puella Magi, but an alien supercomputer. Does everyone understand this? Does everyone get the full freaking gravitas of the situation?
What a weird Lila. Her voice had gotten stranger and stranger ever since they came to this city. Everyone else gave a unified,
"Yes, milady." Good. Now. Joliet.
Dr. Cho rushed past the ranks, skidded to a halt in the slush, and gestured in Joliet's vague direction while she pored over an open notebook with her other hand. Her sharp British accent cut over Lila's incipient protest.
I've commenced work on a new creation, one with a particularly specialized purpose. Think you can help me with it, love? The usual application of your power should suffice, although with a few adjustments of key parameters.
Which led to a lull into which Lila could interject, which she did with a lot of shouting, which made no impression on the continually distracted doctor, who responded positively to an affirmation Joliet never made and skidded back to her creations to usher them to a new spot along the walkway. Once the distraction ended, Lila went back to her speech. Clown Muffle became drowsy. Why did they have to stand so straight? Movement was part of a girl's aesthetic too. And she could not even stare at Joliet, nothing could be worse. Murietta Temecula ignored her existence and Midlothian's random glances her direction failed to sate the boredom that descended as Lila went on to explain some plan.
Or scheme or plot.
Something about
the yacht,
said Junior Administrator and Acting Lieutenant Hedgewish. Who, let her add, had no idea what she was doing. 0. Well, the plan, yeah. She knew about her plan. She spent the whole night at a whiteboard scribbling and erasing and bouncing ideas off Joliet's rubber face. Strategically, she could cut it, more than anyone else. Like Cook or Cicero or the Empress understood tactics. Outside of maybe a Sun Tzu book, because that was the kind of old-ass bullshit the Empress probably made people read and write reports on, but none of them were real soldiers and none of them were real generals. So Hedgewish had faith in her ability to be as good as anyone else at strategy, because at least she had a brain. But leadership? Barking orders? Getting people to follow her? God! She cut Orland with a knife. The thought process behind her plan went something like this. Their chief priority should be to split the enemy forces. Some tacticians might plan a preemptive assault on the enemy location, since Palos had a magical radar that made their position known. But if their enemies had the assistance of Cube, which Hedgewish strongly suspected, that meant their enemies would also know the position of Chicago's forces. So a surprise attack would not work. Striking the enemy at night, while they recharged from their battle with Clown Muffle and Bolingbroke, might also seem wise. But Hedgewish had to remember that every girl in Joliet's platoon had also been fighting wraiths, and wraiths more powerful or more numerous than the ones they were used to, so they did not really have an energy advantage either. That meant they needed to compose a strategy that would force their enemies to come to them. The kind of strategy that didn't rely on trickery or surprise, because Cube would be able to sniff it out and relay it. For a long time Hedgewish sat in the administration building assembly room, racking her brains while Joliet teetered backward and forward on the precipice of obnoxious and pathetic. And Hedgewish finally landed on this strategy of splitting the enemy forces, which was probably a super typical Sun Tzu tier strategy, the kind you could read in a fortune cookie, but also, in this scenario at least, kind of counterintuitive. The enemy had 3 distinct members. The smaller your enemy, the harder it is to split them. But 3 was more than 1, which made it possible. And as Hedgewish considered ways to achieve her goal, she realized. The yacht. One of their enemy, the Terminatrix, could fly. 1, the younger Seattle sister, had a sniper rifle described in the declassified Denver documents as miles long range. But the big armored one would have no way to attack them if they sailed to sea. A slight improvement of their situation, but an improvement nonetheless. They go on the yacht, move out 9 miles into Lake Michigan, and use the magical radar of Palos to keep track of the enemy position. The Terminatrix had a 3-mile range to deploy her projected magical girls, but in order to reach that range she would be forced to fly over a perfectly open sea, with no cover possible. They would be able to bombard her with the Joliet platoon's own long-range attackers, of which several existed. The younger Seattle sister would likely be able to fire at them from that range, based on reports, but they would have, again, a perfectly open sky above a perfectly open sea to watch her projectile sail toward them, and then they could block it with the members of Joliet's platoon that possessed defensive capabilities. The worry would be that the Terminatrix could bypass their offense and get within the 3-mile range to deploy her forces on the boat, which might destabilize their formation and inject chaos into the ranks. But they would have to deal with the Terminatrix under any circumstance Hedgewish could conceive. Her plan was by no means foolproof and she had to remember that. But she figured it was better than any alternative. Nobody in Joliet's platoon had a standout or truly useful ability, except for Palos, whose radar could keep them informed, and Clown Muffle, who was simply unkillable. Also, Joliet herself existed. Hedgewish, 3 in the morning, over scribblings and maps, asked her,
"Your ability, does it have any combat application?"
Joliet gave no straight answer. Hedgewish had a theory of her own that Joliet's power had something to do with mind manipulation, because new recruits often went to Joliet for
readjustment.
If it could be weaponized, then it granted them a new advantage. But Joliet was useless as a human being. Nonetheless, Hedgewish explained to the 20 surviving members of Joliet's platoon the plan.
"This plan will not be questioned. This plan's success lies in everyone's ability to believe it will work."
She said it like she had 100% faith in her plan. She stared at Orland, the most veteran member of Joliet's platoon. But Orland said nothing. Her face was still bleeding from Hedgewish's earlier slash. "Dear God. Dear Madoka Kaname, help them all live." She touched her forehead. The frigid temperatures caused her skin to grow taut and ashen. Joliet quivered beside her. Several of the platoon girls, despite their training, despite the dampening of cold, quivered too. The proclamation that Bolingbroke was dead had startled many. The gravity of the situation weighed upon them.
"We have to hurry now,"
she said.
"Now that I've said it aloud, it's almost certain the incubator has heard our plan. He can easily mobilize our enemies to move before we initiate it. Orland, take 5 girls of your choice and get the yacht ready to go. The rest of you, we need to move supplies and sensitive documents from administration to the yacht. Let's hurry, and let's all survive."
A trenchant 5 claps set, to Hedgewish's surprise, everyone in motion. Orland immediately indicated those to assist her and they ran toward the docked yacht. The others congregated at Hedgewish's back as she led them into the administration building. In the entryway she had already piled containers. Denver's documents, the machines that housed Chicago's own files, crates of grief cubes, and boxes full of terrestrial weaponry. With military efficiency, the girls hoisted the containers by handles and grips and shuttled them toward the yacht. Hedgewish carried crates of her own. They contained weapons for her personal defense, because if she had to fight she wanted to be able to fucking fight. Sig Sauer MCX assault rifle with 5 56x 45mm NATO rounds. Mossberg 500 pump-action shotgun with 12-gauge ammunition. M240 Lima machine gun with belt-fed 7 62x 51mm NATO rounds. For a sidearm, she already had a M1911 pistol holstered at her hip and a USMC Mark II combat knife in a leather sheath strapped to her ankle. All of this weaponry came from the storehouses under the building, and there were many more. The Empress had somehow gotten her hands on a large amount of it, despite Hedgewish being pretty sure at least some of the stuff was for United States military use only.
"What's the status on the enemy, Palos?"
she said as she tromped down the walkway to the gangplank on the dock. Paula stood nearby with her eyes closed and a hand pressed to the side of her head like she was using a radio.
"Nothing yet, wait. One's moving, all 3 are moving toward us. So the incubator's listening after all. Hurry up ladies. Orland, how's the yacht coming?" "Operational, milady. Awaiting your order to cast off."
With 15 magical girls at her disposal, it only took one trip to ferry the important containers onto the yacht. Hedgewish stood at the side of the gangplank and waited for the stragglers to heave their cases on board.
"Is that everyone? Orland, head count."
Orland, who leaned over the railing of an upper deck, shouted down immediately,
"That's everyone from our platoon." "Where's Centurion Joliet?"
Hedgewish asked, moments before she spotted the sniveler in question staring out at sea near the bowsprit.
All right. Get the cases with the Empire's records inside, somewhere safe. And cast off as soon as possible, enemies incoming. 7 miles enclosing,
said Palos.
What about the physician?
Shouted Orland from above, even as with hand signals she directed her soldiers at the controls. The physician remained on the walkway between the medical and administration building, along with her 3 creations. The creations continued to comb the ground for clues about Madoka Kaname, but the physician rose and turned toward them. Physician, please jump on, we're pulling away from the dock, Orland said. No, that won't be necessary. The physician waved. I'll be fine here. Joliet, please remember that I'll require your assistance for my latest creation. If I survive, said Joliet, I'll help you with anything you want. She retained her position at the bowsprit and did not even look the physician's direction. Then I wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. Bon voyage. She waved and waved and waved as the yacht pulled away from the dock and turned toward the lake. Eventually the ship angled itself so they could no longer see her. Hedgewish had no idea whether the physician's confidence in her ability to survive was warranted or not. She probably could have had the soldiers subdue her and take her on board, but at the same time, the physician was more likely to become a nuisance than anything else. Infinite minutiae, random bullshit, details upon details upon details. Her experience with spreadsheets and data management helped her in that field. She could create a plan that toured all the angles. But could she be a leader, someone people respected and followed? Someone like Denver? Except, in the end, nobody except Hedgewish had followed Denver. In the end, hadn't Denver been the exact person Hedgewish was now, the person who organized files, collected data, considered the angles in a logical fashion? And where did it bring Denver? Well, from the reports of Clown Muffle and Palos, Denver was now part of the Terminatrix. At least she was still alive, but in the days since St. Louis, she had wondered again and again about Denver, and the kindness she showed Hedgewish, her enemy. Some part of Hedgewish feared she could not even live up to the qualities Denver had exhibited, and Denver's qualities had not even been enough. She considered the girls around her, would she truly keep them alive? How many of them would she sacrifice to save herself? Did she take command to rescue everyone, or simply to form a shield of 21 bodies around her? As she turned back and watched the city of Chicago recede into the misty whiteness of the winter morning light, her heart palpitated and she wondered what the hell was she doing and how the hell would she do it. End of chapter. Chapter end.